there was this social circle of we would go out and spend money and go to restaurants or go out for drinks and do some of those things. And it's like the reality is I just didn't have enough money. And finally, I got so bought into my plan that I finally was able to have some sort of a financial backbone for my life. And I just started saying, no, I'm not going to be able to do that.
For some people like me, debt can feel like an incredible weight on your shoulders. After carrying that weight for a while, there comes a time when you say, I am done with this. On our debt-free living segment today, we're going to interview Brad Nelson from Wisconsin. Brad paid off $45,000 of debt in just under 5 years. Today, we're going to learn how he accomplished this family financial goal and what he's doing with his money now. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Appreciate you. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for coming on here and sharing your story and inspiring others to become debt-free as well. Talk to us about your original motivation on why you wanted to become debt-free in the first place.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I think a lot of what people are dealing with now, just with especially with inflation the way that it is. I got tired of stressing all the time about money. It just seemed like throughout my 20s, I made a decent living, always did pretty well at my job and get bonuses and raises. And, I fell for this idea of, when I get that next bonus or that next raise, I will do better then, but that never happened. It seemed like that lifestyle creep just kept creeping in. And I got to my late 20s and early 30s, and I was just like, I just don't want to stress about this stuff anymore. It's like I was living crisis to crisis, no money in savings, no real direction. I was kind of at the ceiling in my job. I liked my job, but I knew like this wasn't going to be a forever thing. And what am I going to do? I got all this debt. I got all these payments. I can't afford really to take, a risk or to jump over to something else with less of a salary. So it was just tough. I was just in a tough spot. My first marriage ended in divorce. And that was kind of like the wake up call for me. We had bought a house back in '08. So right when the housing bubble thing happened, and we got divorced in 2011-ish, and we couldn't sell the house for what it was worth or for what we bought it for. And we ended up having to foreclose and eventually, thankfully, be able to short sell it. But that was the first time in my life where I was just like, I can't do this. I got a 2-year-old son, I got to get my stuff together. We should have never have bought in this house to begin with. Here we are, we're just barely affording to get by. And that was just a huge wake up call to me. And I decided that I just wanted to learn how this stuff works. And I went on what I called was a personal finance crusade, so to speak. And I just started learning, self-educating, listening to podcasts, reading books, taking classes, and just willing to kind of open up the idea of how can I do this stuff differently. And that's kind of how I got started. And really just with the ultimate goal of I wanted to end my paycheck to paycheck life. And I just wanted to be comfortable, have some peace, and actually just feeling content and not having to feel stuck. That's really my goal.
Yeah, I mean, you said so many important things there. We dealt with a lot of the real estate crisis too here in Metro Detroit too during that time frame. And I remember owning a house, and I was so proud of the fact that I bought a house at a young age, and it was $200,000 when I bought it. And then there was a period of time, I think around 2010, something like that. Everything was going down, and the value of my home at the time was $100,000. I'm like, oh man, I owe more on this house than it's worth, and I just felt consumed by the thing. It was just it felt claustrophobic enough for you to want to like go on a personal finance crusade to figure out how to better this. So talk to us about the $45,000. What was the $45,000 made of debt at that time?
A pretty normal general mix of things. Lots of credit cards, student loan debt, vehicles. Those were probably the big three that took up the majority of it. I did also have a personal loan from my grandmother for $5,000 that she had lent me for the first house that we had bought. And I couldn't afford to buy that house nor fix it up. So I had to borrow more money from my grandmother. And crazy enough, Eddie, that was the last debt I ever paid off to become debt free. And I remember she was in a nursing home at the time. I gave her the check. And sadly, Andy, she didn't even remember that she had lent me the money. And so I was like so happy to finally get that off my shoulders, because borrowing money from family and friends is not a fun feeling. And every time I saw her, I was just a reminder of I owe you money, and it felt great to be able to go and give her that check. But then it was just like, you don't even remember? Right. But yeah, it was a mix of kind of what most people are doing right now.
Yeah. It's There's so many emotions tied in with money, and I know we're supposed to decouple emotions from money, but man, it is so hard to do that, especially if it's a loan to family and all that goes into that. Talk to me about the steps that you took from that point when you said, okay, I've got 45,000 here. It's credit card debts, it's student loans, it's cars. What were the steps that you took to start to rid yourself of that debt?
Yeah, mostly for me at first, it was, and this is probably why it took 4 or 5 years, was just the behavior and habit side was tough for me. Um, learning how to budget and learning how to say no, learning how to uh, not fall for social influence. We don't have it in the budget, but friends asked us to go out for drinks or dinner, right? It's not there. I kind of failed my way through it in a lot of ways. And eventually became debt free after 4 or 5 years with that divorce in there. But it was like a lot of the steps of just paying yourself first, getting yourself some sort of an emergency fund or savings to depend on, to break the dependency of having to swipe credit cards all the time. So that was a big step for me, is just learning the value of saving. I never saved a dime in my life outside of maybe having a little less than $1,000 at a time. That's about it.
Yeah.
And then it was using what the common method a lot of people use is just the debt snowball approach, and listing all my debts, smallest to largest, and then just paying them off in that order. And I followed that pretty routinely outside of if I got, like, say, which I don't anymore because I run my own business, a tax return, right? But once I was starting to get a tax return, I'd use that money to maybe say focus on a higher interest one and take out something more with a lump sum cash payment. So, I kind of used a hybrid of the two methods there, but that's essentially what I used to get out as far as the actual tools.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. Now, when the friends would call or those opportunities would come up where you'd want to say yes, but you convinced yourself to say no. How do you do that? Because I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now because maybe they're feeling already pretty tight with inflation outside of lifestyle inflation, and then this societal pressure to get back out there after a pandemic and just reconnect with people and make community. How did you deal with that?
Well, at first, not very well. It was very hard because I was so used to. In fact, a lot of the people that I hung out with there was this social circle of we would go out and spend money and go to restaurants or go out for drinks and do some of those things. And it's like the reality is I just didn't have enough money. And
Yeah.
finally, I got so bought into my plan that I finally was able to have some sort of a financial backbone for my life. And I just started saying, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. Some relationships did suffer, unfortunately. And that's the sad reality of this, is that you might experience some of that. But at the end of the day, I knew, like, in order for me to live the life that I wanted to live, like, I had to get through this. I had to get this debt paid off. I wanted some different things for my life. I wanted to be able to experience some different things for my life. And I knew with having all these payments, that was just never going to happen. And
Yeah.
so I finally just, bought into that plan, really believed in, the why behind why I was doing this. And eventually that was what got me to say no a lot more often. In fact, I said no so much that I stopped getting invited to a lot of things. Even today, people, there's still a group of friends that are out there that I'll find out that they went and did something and I don't get invited for some of that because I always said no. And it's not that I didn't like them, but it's just that I had to stand up for my financial life in order to get out of debt. And
Yeah.
you're seeing that right now. There's a new term, loud budgeting, right? Being
Yeah.
intentional and being out loud with your habits and what you're doing, your goals, your financial goals. Instead of saying I can't afford it, you're saying I'm choosing not to spend. That's kind of what I did all those years ago. Loud budgeting is this supposed new thing. It's not new. It's been around a long time. It's just becoming popular again. So, but that's essentially how I did it.
I like transparency and breaking down this taboo of money and being able to talk about your reality. I mean, I feel like that's what a true friend is. If you be like, "Hey, this is something I'm struggling with right now and I'm working on it. Support me as a friend." And obviously, if the reason we're bonding with friends is because of those types of activities and stuff like that, I get that. I personally have dealt with that as well, and that can be a difficult situation. It's working to find those other ways to connect that don't require you to go into credit card debt in order to enjoy them. I think that so many people would appreciate that story right now, and I appreciate you sharing it. Talk
Yeah.
to us about your general income range during that time frame while you were paying off this $45,000 in 5 years, because some people might hear that number and say, "Wow, that's great. That's like, what is that, 10,000 a year to 12,000 a year,
Yeah.
something like that." In order to do that, That must have been a pretty aggressive thing to do. What kind of income range were you working with?
In that time period, is about 45 to $50,000 a year. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
I didn't, but I also was willing to make some sacrifices in the area. One of
Yeah.
the big things that I did is at the time, and this is still kind of a high car payment, but not as high as it is now, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
$500 car payment that we had on a new car that we had bought. We had it a couple years. Thankfully, it was a Toyota, so it
Mm-hmm.
held its value pretty well. But I ended up getting a tax return that I was able to pay cash for a $3,000 little 1996 Toyota Corolla. I had 150,000 miles on it.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I'm going to buy this car, and then I'm going to sell this one. But I also had to scrape up some money because I was a little upside down in the new car still. So I scraped
Mm-hmm.
up some money, got that paid down enough where the bank would release the title so I could sell it. And that right there freed up about $500 a month alone in being able to attack debt. And I also got rid of that debt on top of it. So I did things like that. I also, basic services, like I got rid of like cable and satellite TV long before it was popular to get rid of cable and satellite TV.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix wasn't around then, YouTube, none of this other stuff was around. So when you cut out cable, people were like, what are you going to do with your life, especially living in Wisconsin in the winter, right? And I got myself a little free HD antenna, and I literally just threw that thing out this past year. I had it all of these years. Um, and this year was the first year I went back to like a subscription service because my son likes to watch the NBA basketball games.
Yeah.
And so he's old enough now. It's like, okay, we're out of that. We'll bring that back in so you can watch the games and stuff. But I got rid of TV all these years. I think about the thousands of dollars I've saved just from sacrificing on TV. So, it wasn't always just paying it off using the debt snowball. It was also what can I sacrifice and what can I get rid of? What can I sell? To relieve a lot of this debt a lot quicker.
I love that. I love that. So 5 years later, you're debt free. Tell us about what that meant for you. Did this change things for you? How did you celebrate? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it was an awesome feeling, but honestly, not as exciting as I thought it was going to be when I reached
Okay.
that day. It was
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, okay. Like, because people, it's like you said, finances are a very taboo topic, right?
Sure.
If you mention like, hey, you're debt free, you're celebrating your financial journey, a lot of people are just living paycheck to paycheck, following that herd mentality. It's a weird thing. Like, it's not something
Yeah.
we celebrate, right?
It's not many people out there celebrating it except for wacky podcasts like this, right?
Right. And so it was kind of a weird thing. We celebrated, but it wasn't like this huge thing. It was just
Mhm.
it was kind of like the air got out of your sails a little bit, and it's like, okay, now we got to focus on the next thing, right?
Yeah.
But I will say the journey out of debt was probably the most valuable thing because I learned a lot about myself. I actually created the business that I now run while getting out of debt, even though I didn't even know it. If I go back, I have a journal that I was keeping on things that I wanted to do, careers I wanted to work at, what I wanted my job to be like. And crazy enough, that list that I wrote out over a decade ago is now my business, which is crazy.
I love that. That's
And
incredible.
it's just insane. So I would say, like, on the day we became debt free, not so exciting, but it was the days after that that were really exciting. It was the fact that we had no more stress. We were able to do the things that we wanted to do and pay cash, obviously be reasonable about it. We ended up being able to buy a home. This is the only debt that I have is my mortgage now, and we did that with no credit score. And we beat all those doubters down that you can't do it without a credit score. Well, you can. I'm proof of that. So we took the hard road to get out of debt, and it's paid off immensely now. And now I've been running my business now going on 8 years, and I do it full time. Get to control my own time, spend time with my kids. Like, it's completely transformed my entire life, and it's also helped me get through some really difficult times in my life too. We tend to always think about what are the good things I'm going to get out of debt freedom, but what are you going to get out of it when the bad times come too?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us go through bad times. And I got to tell you, having your financial life in order, having your financial stuff together, it really makes a huge difference in weathering a lot of those life storms and getting through that. Because for a lot of people, usually financial crisis goes with bad times in life. And
Yeah.
when you manage your money right, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So that's been a great blessing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the journey. I mean, as part of this journey, you're building up an emergency fund so that you don't have to go back into credit card debt. And that
Right.
emergency fund alone, when life comes and smacks you in the face, is just like a shield. It just protects you from all this trouble. And to your point, you've avoided a lot of that trouble and probably shown your kids some great examples in the process. Can you talk to us about being a dad
Yeah.
and what this financial example has meant to you as a dad and then to your children and just general generational wealth plans for their future?
Yeah, I mean, I think my son Noah at the time when I started doing this, he was 2, and he was a big motivator for it because I looked at myself and said, I'm a terrible example to this kid on how to manage money. I know what it's done to my life. I'm stressed. Like I can't have this for him. So he was a big motivator. So I think for my 2 kids, I got 2. I got a 14-year-old and my daughter's 5, and my daughter has some special needs, and so having our financial life in order just for that has been huge. But for them, especially Noah, obviously Avery's a little bit younger. She's 5, but we still have conversations like, Andy, I don't might think I'm crazy for this, but when you buy toys for your kids, especially like cash registers and anything related to money, guess what you get in those toys? You get a credit card. And guess who doesn't have one? Avery. She doesn't have one.
There you
you know?
go.
So I know that for some people, like some people like, oh, it's cute. It's a little credit. It makes noise. It's swipe. It's like, that's where the habits begin. It's
Yeah,
how
there's
you
some
start
training
to
going on there, right?
exactly. Right. So I'm going to take it away. And again, not because it's like, terribly bad or anything like, but I don't want her to start already mimicking a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I want her to see the right way on how to handle it. And then if she wants to introduce some of those things in her adult life, maybe she does that. Right. But for my son right now, so many teachable moments, when you talk about money, just in how you go about just your own adult life and teaching them. Like the other day, I was talking to him about how much the mortgage is, how expensive or how much it is to live here, the utilities that go with it, the plans that you have to have. My whole life has gone through this huge transition this past year because I lost my wife about a year ago, and
Hmm.
so I'm on one income now where we were on 2 living in this house. And so it's been a big transition for me in being able to handle a lot of those expenses. So I've had those conversations with Noah because he's like, talking about things that he wants to do. And it's like, well, those things are great, but you got to understand, like, things have changed and we have to, be mindful of where all of our money's going now. I'm only on 1 income versus 2. So, we have these conversations together and it's open. I grew up in a household where financial conversations were very general. It wasn't specific. Have a good credit score. Make sure you save a little bit of money for your retirement. Don't go into too much debt. It was just general things, but nothing specific, like to show you how to do it. You know, and so I want to have those conversations with him and show him, like, he's getting ready. He's 14. He's going to get a job when he turns 15. He's already talking about it. So I'm already going to start working with him on budgeting and just, here's how you're going to manage your money. Here's how the taxes work. Making sure that he understands all of those things at a young age, introducing him to things like kids' Roth IRAs, and teaching him early investing. I've already started investing for both of those kids many, many years ago. And just something as simple as just $75 a month in an index fund. That's all I'm doing. Custodial accounts for him. And then I've got a different account for my daughter because she has special needs. But, just $75 a month. We're just putting that money away. And as he gets older, I've been sharing with him, like, hey, this is what I've been putting in. And my expectation for you is just to keep putting in that $75 every single month until you're in your 60s. And I guarantee you'll have no problem retiring.
Love that.
But it's starting it out early and just showing them. And I think so many parents, like, we work with a lot of people who come to me and say, Brad, how can I teach my kids that? You're teaching me this stuff. And it's like, well, just, you can teach them so much just by the way you manage and live live your life and manage your money. You don't have to, like, go over and above. It's just conversations that you can have on a regular basis.
Yeah, it all starts with us. I mean,
Yeah.
we fix our situation like you have, and then you show your son how to do it a lot earlier than you did, and then he'll have a better future because of it. Now, Brad, somebody's listening. They saw the title of this show. Somebody paid off $45,000 in 5 years. I want to do that. I want to rid myself of this debt in my life. What is one piece of advice that you would give to that person in a similar situation today?
Yeah, I would say one of the best things that you can do, especially as you're getting started, if there's one thing you can do to improve your finances this year, and you do it consistently for the year, is just be more aware of where your money's going. We had a statistic on our podcast that we talked about. Upwards of 50% of millennials have no idea what's going on in their bank account, so they're just not paying attention. So I think one of the best things you can do before you get started, because a lot of people say, I don't have enough money to save. I don't have enough money to get out of debt. I used to feel the same way. So after this, go print out the last 3 to 6 months of your bank statements, your credit card statements, PayPal, Cash App, anywhere you're spending money, and figure out where your money's been going. I can guarantee you, and I have not had one person, Andy, come back to me and say, Brad, I knew exactly where all my money is going. There was not one surprise to me. Every single person that comes back to me that does this says, I am shocked about what I found. Like, I didn't realize I was spending so much money on this or on this or on this. It's like we do actually have some money that we could help to improve our finances. We're just not using it properly. So if you can do this consistently, keep track of your expenses, where your money's going, establish some good short-term goals, even maybe think about some long-term goals, and then how can we change our spending based on what we want to do? That action right there can create so much forward momentum for you. Um, and it's also going to help you really like analyze your habits, your behaviors, and your choices. That was a big thing for me. You're going to start to see some of those things. So now when you're in the middle of something you shouldn't be spending money on, it's like, oh, I've known about this. We need to stay away from this one, right? But you're not gonna be perfect at it, but that's okay. You'll get better, and that's really all you're shooting for. Is just getting better every day.
Yeah, incremental improvements day by day. It'll make a big difference in the long run. Just like Brad's example today. Brad, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. If people want to connect with you, maybe learn more about what's going on with you, where should they go?
Yeah, you can go check out the debtfreedad.com. You can also check out our podcast, Debt Free Dad Podcast. Cool thing about our podcast, we got 5 co-hosts on our show, and
Awesome.
all 5 of us have completely different backgrounds. We got someone who's single. We've got someone who's in their older years that's kind of retired, but now opened up their own business because they're debt free. I've got my brother who was the biggest doubter that you could reach debt freedom, and now he is debt free, and he talks about it from his perspective. I got someone from Canada that's on our show that's in a different country talking about their perspective of it. So you get a really good round of people with different backgrounds and how they've dealt with getting out of debt. And we cover so many different topics. And we also bring on some amazing guests as well and share their stories and getting out of debt. So that's some of the great places that you can at least get acquainted with us.
Excellent. Yeah. If you appreciated Brad's story today, I'm sure you can get a lot more motivation on his podcast. Check it out, debtfreedad.com. Brad, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you.